Welcome to the next video in our series on the regional circulations. In this video, we'll start off by talking about the kidneys, the renal beds. The first thing you'll notice is that this tissue is very active. Per 100 grams of tissue, it uses a lot of oxygen because there's a lot of transport going on. When we get to the kidneys, it will become very obvious why that is. So it does have a relatively high metabolic need. Despite that, it's still overperfused, and it still gets more oxygen than you might predict when you look at the percentage of the total oxygen in the body that it actually consumes. Okay, so it's still overperfused. The reason is because it needs to make urine. So your kidney has a lot of functions. It has to support filtration and reabsorption and secretion of substances in and out of the renal tubular fluid, which eventually becomes urine. These are very active processes, and in some cases they're going to require a lot of water, and that water comes from the blood supply. Okay? So the kidneys are a portal system. You have an efferent arteriole that connects the glomerulus, which you see here, to the vasa recta, which you see here. This surrounds the renal tubules and is involved in exchange of nutrients between the tubular fluid and the blood. We'll talk about the details of that when we get to kidney. You don't need to know that now. This actually filters blood to create urine. The glomerulus does. We have this efferent arteriole in between. So we have a portal system where we're connecting two capillary beds via a portal vessel, in this case the efferent arteriole. Okay. Now notice that the kidney has a special problem in that the vasa recta dips down into the kidney medulla. And when you look at the kidney medulla, the osmolarity goes higher and higher the deeper you go into the medulla. And this has to do with the way that the kidneys generate urine and concentrate it. Okay? And that means there's more and more sodium as you go deeper and deeper into the kidney. Okay? So you have a special problem. The sodium will cross easily across the capillary walls into the blood. And as you go deeper and deeper into the medulla, you accumulate more and more sodium. And so if you have blood that enters at the cortex of the kidney and exits at the medulla of the kidney as it surrounds the renal tubules and participates in generation of urine, it's going to exit with a lot of sodium in it. And you're going to lose sodium by the barrel full. Okay? And that's not good. Okay? You and I, we don't eat that much sodium, and we'd have a heck of a time doing it if we were losing this much. So what happens instead is the vasa recta dips down into the medulla, and then it comes back up. And instead of exiting through the medulla, it exits back through the cortex of the kidney, where the osmolarity isn't as high, and where the sodium, it goes into the vasa recta as it goes down, but then it comes back out again as it comes back up across the concentration gradient. So more and more sodium as you go down, more and more sodium accumulated as you go down, but then that sodium comes back out as you come back up. So this is another example of countercurrent exchange where sodium can leave here, be accumulated here, and then leave here again. Okay, so you have countercurrent exchange of sodium from one side to the other. Okay, and that prevents sodium loss from the body, just like countercurrent exchange prevented oxygen loss in the GI tract, and it prevents heat loss if it's cold outside in the skin. Okay? All right, let's talk a little bit about skeletal muscle. Down here, this is skin. Up here, this is skeletal muscle. You have a lot more tissue and a lot more capillaries than you do in the skin. Okay? You have a large mass of tissue with a fairly low resting metabolism, but it needs to get a lot of oxygen when it needs it. So neural controls are present, and they do participate in reflex responses. And I've told you this before in earlier videos. If I exercise on my right and my left is just hanging down, my left arm is just hanging down by my side, this arm is earning more oxygen. Metabolites are building and getting vasodilation. But there's no reason to vasodilate or give this arm an extra amount of oxygen at all because it's just sitting at rest. So I'm getting vasodilation here, I'm getting constriction in skeletal muscle that's not exercising, okay? And that really helps with the reflex response because it shunts blood away from skeletal muscle and into organs which might need it, or skeletal muscle, active skeletal muscle that might need it when I'm exercising. So skeletal muscle does participate in the barrel reflex, but you only get constriction in resting muscle or a muscle where you're not really exercising it or you haven't increased the metabolic rate, okay? Requires a large increase in perfusion with increased tissue activity, skeletal muscle contraction, and it does that through local metabolic responses, which are very strong. So I get dilation here when I'm exercising, not here. Okay. You also have met arterioles, which sort of run in here and connect the venial to the arterial. And you do get capillary recruitment. So when I'm getting vasodilation here, these precapillary sphincters open up, and I get more capillaries that get more blood, which exposes more tissue to more oxygen. So I can get recruitment of capillaries through dilation of these precapillary sphincters. And as a result of that, less blood goes directly from the arterial to the venial. Okay? We also have a special characteristic in skeletal muscle. We have what's called the muscle pump, which aids in circulation. So the muscle pump helps to return more venous blood to the heart at times when your skeletal muscle is active. Here's how it works. So I'm quietly standing here, right? And my muscle is relatively relaxed, and I have blood flowing through the veins back toward the heart here, okay? And you'll notice these veins have valves here, and those valves are open, and blood is flowing nice and easily through that skeletal muscle through open valves, okay? Now I take a step, one-way valves, okay? Now I take a step, and I constrict the muscle in my leg, okay? And the muscle constricts, and it squeezes this vein, and it increases the pressure here, so that the pressure here is higher than the pressure here downstream. And as a result, the valve closes. This is a one-way valve. It works like the heart. It's not as good a valve as the heart valve, but it'll close when the pressure in front of it is higher than the pressure behind it and prevent blood from flowing back toward the foot. On the other hand, I've increased the pressure here. The pressure here is higher than the pressure here. And I increase the blood flow, and I shove blood toward the heart. And I increase the venous return when I take a step and constrict that skeletal muscle. Now, I relax the muscle after my step is over, and the pressure here drops. And the pressure in front of this valve is now less than the pressure behind it. This valve opens up, and blood flows and refills this area. On the other hand, the pressure drop here means the pressure in front of this valve is higher than the pressure behind it, okay? And as a result, blood wants to flow from high pressure to low pressure back to the muscle, but this valve closes and won't allow it. And so blood is not allowed to flow back into the muscle from this direction and from this direction. So we're pumping blood toward the heart as we constrict our skeletal muscle, and as that constriction happens with the help of these one-way valves, you force blood toward the heart and don't allow it to blood flow away from the heart. So we call that the muscle pump, and it helps aid venous return during exercise. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the brain. It's contained within a rigid container, and so any increase in the volume of the tissue is going to impinge upon the blood vessels and increase the pressure, and that's going to affect your blood pressure. If you have a space-occupying lesion, you can restrict flow because you've impinged down upon the vessels, something to bear in mind. The CNS has almost no anaerobic capacity, and so blood flow is very important to make sure that it continues to your brain, and your body does its best to make sure that happens. Role of neural controls is small. That should make sense to you. Yeah, I'm exercising, I'm running away from a bear, but I still want my brain to work. I'm not going to constrict blood flow to my brain in order to maintain mean arterial pressure. Most of the time I'm maintaining that pressure so that I can maintain blood flow to the brain, because it doesn't work very well unless it gets oxygen, okay? And so it doesn't really participate in reflex responses, the baroreflex. We have strong metabolic controls, and that should make sense to you. Increased CO2 acts as a very potent vasodilator, so that when a region of your brain needs blood, it gets it, okay? And you can see how exquisite this control is. You actually get hot spots in your brain of blood flow depending upon what you do. So for instance, if you stimulate the hand, the muscles in the hand to contract, certain areas get more blood flow, and they're the areas that are involved in making sure that those muscles contract. And you can literally measure the increase in blood flow. If you clench your hand instead of just stimulating the fingers to contract, you get an increase in flow to different areas. If you're reading, you get an increase in flow to different areas compared to if you're just contracting some of the muscles in your hand. So whatever you're doing, if certain areas of your brain become more active, they actually get more blood flow. And that's because of the local metabolic controls. They're extremely exquisite in that they really work very well to increase blood flow to different regions, okay? All right, that's all I've got for this video. That's all I've got for this lesson. Thank you for your attention, and I will see you guys in the rooms.